Ever find yourself glued to those inheritance disputes? The ones with the family secrets and the surprise wills, and maybe even a long-lost relative pops up.
Always makes for good drama.
Well, get ready, because we're diving into a real-life legal battle straight from the Philippine Supreme Court.
And this one, while it's about a piece of land, it shows how important legal procedures are, especially when you've got multiple people wanting their piece of the pie, so to speak, when it comes to inheritance.
It's so true, and we're looking at case GR No. 224414. It was decided back in 2020. And get this, we've got excerpts from the actual court decision.
Oh, wow, the original
The
documents.
original documents. So before you think court case sounds dry, I promise you this isn't your average courtroom drama. This has got twists and turns and family drama. Intrigue. A whole lot of it. All right, picture this. Pagudpud, Ilocos Norte, Philippines. Beautiful beaches. That island life.
Ah, setting the scene. A nice tropical getaway.
You could say that. But beneath that peaceful surface, we have a family feud brewing. And at the center of it all, a piece of land. Originally, it was owned by a man named Justo Mata.
Okay.
Now, Justo, he ends up selling this land.
All right.
And that's where things start to get interesting.
Because
He sells it to a couple, Pedro Mata Sr. and his wife, Josefina. Sadly, Pedro Sr., he passes away. And later on, Josefina, she remarries a man named Emilio Kawili.
Okay, so now you've
What
got
do you got?
the blended family dynamic.
Blended family. And that changes things.
Oh, absolutely, because now it's not just about inheriting from your parents, it's inheriting from your step-parents, and how does that all legally play out?
Exactly. So fast forward, Josefina and Emilio, they also pass away. But instead of a peaceful transition of property, they leave behind a whole bunch of disputes. One of Pedro Sr.'s sons, a man named Elmer, he cries foul,
Okay.
saying his stepmother, Josefina, and her new husband, Emilio, they might have pulled a fast one to cut him out.
So he's feeling like he's been cheated out of what is rightfully his.
He's feeling cheated. And this is where understanding Philippine inheritance law gets really important.
Absolutely.
Because he wasn't just saying, oh, they were unfair. He was saying they broke the law.
Right, he's alleging that they've sidestepped some very specific legal boundaries.
So what exactly did he accuse them of doing? So Elmer, he's claiming that Josefina and Emilio, they secretly transferred that land into their names while they were still alive.
See, that right there, that's suspicious, especially when we're talking inheritance. It's one thing if you're managing assets together, you're married, right? But transferring that ownership, that could be them trying to get around those inheritance laws.
Exactly. And it wasn't just that. Elmer, he also said they subdivided the land. Again, without telling him, no permission or anything.
Which, if they were then going to use those subdivisions to gift to other people or even sell it off, that takes away from what would have been part of the inheritance to be divided legally.
It's like they were trying to completely cut him out. But he also had something else, right? About the
Yes.
taxes?
Yes. Tax records. They can be really telling in these property disputes because they show who claimed to own what and when.
So if there are inconsistencies, that would back up what Elmer's saying about those secret transfers.
Exactly. It's like a paper trail, but with money. And it either supports what they're saying or it totally contradicts it.
Okay, so we've got these secret transfers, we've got this questionable dividing up the land, and then potentially these tax records that don't add up.
Yeah.
Elmer's suspicious for a reason.
Yeah.
But you mentioned that Philippine inheritance law, it's got its own special rules.
It does. It has this thing, the Philippines, called compulsory heirs,
Okay.
which really makes things interesting. Basically, you can't just write certain close relatives out of your will.
Wait, so even if, say, Josefina and Emilio wanted to leave everything to, I don't know, a charity or some distant relative, they couldn't cut out Pedro Sr.'s children completely.
You got it. The law says, nope, a portion of that estate, it's going to these compulsory heirs no matter what. And without a will, which in this case, there wasn't a valid will from Josefina and Emilio saying otherwise,
Right.
their stuff, it gets split equally among those heirs, which would include Elmer.
So even if they had given some of that land away, Elmer's still entitled to a piece of what's left.
In theory, yes. But that's assuming those transfers were even legal in the first place, and that's part of what the court had to figure out.
That makes sense. Now, if they were trying to transfer the land, who were they giving it to? Aside from trying to maybe cut out Elmer, who else was in line?
Well, that's where we get even more people involved. First, you have Georgia Kaweli, who claimed to be Josefina's adopted son.
Oh, okay. So if he's recognized legally as her son, then he's also a compulsory heir along with Elmer.
Exactly. So now you have to look at, is this adoption legitimate? And how does that change how the inheritance gets split?
This is getting more complicated.
Yeah.
And it doesn't stop there. There were others who had gotten pieces of the land too, right?
Yeah, there were. That's right. Morales, Paulo, Flores, and Ancheta also enter the picture.
What were they claiming?
Their story was a bit different. They said Josefina had given them those portions of the land throughout the years in exchange for them supporting her financially, doing her favors, professional services.
So she was paying them back with property.
Essentially.
Right.
But as you can imagine, proving that kind of agreement without any paperwork, very, very difficult. It often ends up being he said, she said. So how do you know what's true and whether their claims are even valid?
Right. So we've got the son who says that's his inheritance, a potential adopted son, and now this group saying, no, she gave us this land.
Yeah.
Sounds like a recipe for a legal battle royale.
It really does. And this leads us to the first court case, where things take a dramatic turn.
All right, so we've got this land, we've got all these claims, everyone's saying it's theirs. How did the courts even start to sort it all out?
Well, first it went to a lower court, and they actually sided with Elmer.
Okay.
You might think, yay, the underdog wins. But hold on.
There's always a but.
Right. This is a deep dive for a reason. So this lower court, they didn't just say who got what. They actually said those land transfers, the ones that Elmer was saying were shady, those were void. Like they never happened.
Oh, wow.
Trying to reset things to how they were.
So that's good for Elmer so far.
I think seems like it.
Yeah.
The court said, okay, split the land between Elmer and his brother's heirs, because sadly, his brother, Pedro Jr., had passed away. But here's where it gets even more interesting.
I knew there was going to be another twist. What happened?
The lower court, they also said that Pedro Jr.'s heirs, they had to give up some of their land.
Wait a minute. How could they do that if those heirs weren't even part of the original case?
That's the problem. They missed a really important legal idea. Indispensable parties.
Indispensable parties. Explain that like I'm just tuning in.
Basically, you can't have a fair trial if you leave out people who have a stake in what happens. Imagine making a cake, but you forget, like, a main ingredient. It's going to turn out all wrong. Same with the law. Everyone who has a claim needs to be at the table.
So because those heirs weren't in the first lawsuit, the court messed up by deciding things about their land without them even being there to defend themselves.
Exactly. And the Philippine Supreme Court, they saw this mistake. They overturned what the lower court did. It wasn't that they disagreed about the land itself, but that the lower court didn't do things fairly. The process matters. And that's actually what's so fascinating about this whole case. It's not just about inheritance, but how important that fair legal process is.
Yeah, it makes you think. Even with family and emotions running high, the courts have to make sure things are done right, even if it takes longer.
Absolutely. This is why you've got to have those wills, clear documents. It prevents these situations from getting out of hand.
So what ended up happening? Did Elmer and everyone else, did they get their day in court, but with everyone included this time?
That's what the Supreme Court said. They sent it back to the lower court with specific instructions. Get Pedro Jr.'s heirs involved and that adopted son claim. You need to really investigate that.
What a story. So we're left wondering, did justice really prevail? I guess we'll never know the final outcome, at least not from this deep dive. But it definitely shows you how complicated families, inheritance, all of it can be, and how important a fair legal process is to navigate it all.
It does make you think, what if you were the judge? What would you want to hear from each side to make sure the decision was fair?
That's such a good question. It reminds us that these cases, they're not just about names on a piece of paper. They're about families, relationships, and really understanding each person's side of things.
Well, this has been quite the deep dive into Philippine inheritance law.
It has. And it reminds us communication is key, right? Clear documents and understanding how the legal system works, especially with something as important as inheritance. Absolutely. And on that note, we'll leave you to ponder all the twists and turns of this case. Make sure to join us next time when we tackle another fascinating topic and uncover those hidden stories that remind us the law is never black and white. It's about people. And until then, get those affairs in order, because you never know what life or the legal system might throw your way.